Alright, what's happening everybody? It's your boy Akeem and welcome to today's vlog. Continuing my top 5 prospects for each position for the 2012 NFL Draft. Now I'm going to finally head over to the defensive side and start off with the defensive ends. And honestly, I believe that out of all the groups for this year's NFL Draft, this group has the best depth out of all these positions. And I really think 3 of these defensive ends that I have in my top 5 should make it out of the first round of this year's NFL Draft. Now I'm going to start at number 5. I'm going to go with Andre Branch of Clemson. This kid had a big year, 10.5 sacks to go along with 17 tackles for loss. Now, he had produced so well over the years in college football for his career. He didn't start off his career too well, but as the years progressed, he did better as each year went by. He ended up with a great senior year with 10.5 sacks. He didn't do as well as Daquan Bowers a couple of years back for Clemson, but he had a couple of big games this season, particularly against Virginia Tech, and they're both of their key victories. At number 4, I'm going to go with Nick Perry of USC. He was the best defensive end in the Pac-12 conference this season. This kid had 9.5 sacks to go along with 13 tackles for loss. And this kid runs a 4.640 at 271 pounds, and that's why he had to be in my top 5. Some people even might have him as a number 1 or number 2 defensive end for this year's NFL Draft. At number 3, I'm going to go with Whitney Marsalis of Illinois. This kid led the Big Ten Conference with 16 sacks this season to go along with 22 tackles for loss. The only reason why I have him at number 3 is because he was a one-year wonder. This was his only blow-up year. He had a couple of bad seasons starting off his college football career, but he blew up out of nowhere this season. That's why he's at my number 3, but he had a big year. At number 2, a little bit of a controversy for some people, but I'm going to go with Quentin Couples of North Carolina. This kid is a behemoth, 284 pounds and 6'5", and he runs a 4.78 40. This kid he's a behemoth and he has good enough speed. But the reason why I have him at number 2 and not at number 1 is that he's not an elite pass rusher like some of the other players that I mentioned so far. He had just 7.5 sacks to go along with 15.5 tackles for loss this season. Now last year he had over 10 sacks, but he had to deal with a little bit of senioritis this season and didn't do too well as a sack master. But this kid has so much strength. He has so much potential to be a good dominant defensive end using his strength, and maybe if he increases his speed, he will be one of the elite defensive ends in the NFL, probably in the future. And at number 1, I'm going to go with Melvin Ingram of South Carolina. He had a great week in Senior Bowl practice. He pretty much bullied anybody who was stepping up in front of him, and he had a great year. He had 10 sacks this season to go along with 15 tackles for loss. He's a little bit undersized at 6'1", 64 pounds, but he's a beast of a player, and he never quits, and he definitely steps up to any player he has in front of him, and he plays very aggressively and violently. And I really think between him and Quentin Couples, the Jacksonville Jaguars at picking number 7, they're definitely looking at both of these players. I think one of these 2 players will be picked for the Jaguars in this year's NFL Draft, unless they trade up or any big bizarre trades happen before this NFL Draft. But I really think between these 2 players, I think the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to key on them. Now I have a couple of honorable mentions to talk about. Vinny Curry from Marshall, he had 22 tackles for loss, and he was the Conference USA Defensive Player of the Year for the 2nd year in a row. He had a big season. He is definitely a great honorable mention, just barely off of my top 5. But this kid, like I said, there's so much good depth this season in the defensive end position for this year's draft, and I really think Vinny Curry is a great honorable mention. Another honorable mention, Jared Crick from Nebraska. I mentioned him earlier in the college football season in one of my early videos for my preview. I had him probably as one of my Big 12 honorable mentions, probably the Defensive Player of the Year that I predicted. This kid, Big 10 Defensive Player of the Year. He had a great junior season. He had to deal with a lot of injuries this year, and that's why his stock dropped just a little bit and his stats. But I really think he's a good honorable mention, and I think if he just heals himself and he becomes healthy, he could be a threat in the NFL. Now, my sleeper for the defensive end position, I'm going to go with Jonathan Massaquoi of Troy. Just like out of Troy, DeMarcus Ware, he came out of Troy, and I think Troy produced another good defensive end. He did not do too well this season compared to last year, being one of the top sack masters of the nation as a junior. but he had a bad senior season, and I think he can still boost his stock up, depending on his workout. I think he could be one of the top 7 defensive ends, depending on his workout. But I really think he's a sleeper for this year's NFL draft. I think a lot of teams slept on this kid because of what happened this year compared to his junior season. But I think he can get back in notch and get back in shape and become a good, solid defensive end in the NFL. Now, the next time I'm going to catch you guys is on Saturday to give you my top 5 defensive tackles. Thank you for watching this vlog from Pro Football Exclusive. I'm your man, the famous Hakeem McCall. Be easy.